Don't leave, you're the only one who came. The billionaire CEO sat back down and held her hand. On blind date. The rain tapped gently against the windows of the small corner cafe, casting silver ripples on the sidewalk outside. Warm amber lights glowed overhead, giving the space a cozy hum that contrasted with the chill outside. The air smelled faintly of cinnamon and espresso. Ethan sat at a corner table near the window, dressed in a plain charcoal hoodie and dark jeans. He looked like any regular man waiting out the storm, but behind his calm exterior sat a man with more wealth than most could imagine. A billionaire CEO who had built an empire yet had grown weary of being seen only for his money. Beside him, a little girl sat on her knees on the cushioned bench, focused entirely on the small paint kit and paper in front of her. Lily, his 3-year-old daughter with golden curls and bright blue eyes, was humming softly as she mixed yellow and pink together. "You are making a mess, little artist," Ethan said quietly, brushing a dot of paint from her cheek. Lily giggled. "Is a rainbow dinosaur, Daddy?" He smiled, but his eyes drifted toward the door. This was his 6th blind date in 3 weeks. Each one had ended with forced smiles and subtle glances at his watch, or worse, questions about his job, his house, or the kind of car he drove, and all of them had looked uncomfortable when Lily reached for their hands. A small bell rang above the door. He looked up. She stepped inside quietly, closing her umbrella with care. Her blonde hair was damp at the edges, framing a soft, fresh face. She wore a simple cream sweater, jeans, and worn white sneakers. No flashy purse, no exaggerated makeup, just a quiet presence. "Ethan?" she asked as she approached. He stood. "Yes." "Sophie?" She smiled and extended her hand. "Sorry I am a bit late. The train was slow in the rain." He gestured to the seat across from him. "No problem at all. Please, have a seat." As Sophie sat down, her eyes went straight to Lily, who was now eyeing her curiously from the side. "And who is this beautiful artist?" she asked gently. Lily perked up. "I am Lily. I am painting a dinosaur." Sophie leaned in closer, her elbows resting on the edge of the table. "A rainbow dinosaur. That is the most magical kind." Lily grinned. "Do you want to help?" Ethan blinked, surprised. No one had ever asked to engage with Lily first, not like this. Sophie had not even glanced at the menu, let alone asked about his job. She was fully focused on the small girl sitting between them. Sophie reached out and dipped a finger in the yellow paint. "Only if I get to paint the sunshine behind him." The 3 of them laughed softly, and for the first time in a while, Ethan let his guard down just a little. They talked gently over the next 15 minutes. Ethan told her he worked in tech, left it vague. She nodded and asked nothing more. Instead, she asked Lily what her favorite color was, what book she liked best. She even wiped Lily's nose gently when the little girl sneezed, without missing a beat. And then, Sophie glanced at her watch. Her smile faded. "I am really sorry," she said, standing suddenly. I have to go." Ethan stood quickly, confused. "Is everything all right?" She hesitated. "It is, just something urgent. I wish I could stay longer, I really do." He watched her pick up her bag, and a rush of something unexpected surged through him. Fear, not of being alone again, but of letting go of the first person who had not looked at him with calculation, who had laughed with his daughter before even asking his last name. He reached gently for her hand. "Do not leave," he said softly. "You are the only one who came." She looked down at their hands, surprised, her eyes flicking up to meet his. Something unspoken passed between them, warmth, curiosity, and the faintest pull of fate. Later that evening, the rain had softened into a mist. The city shimmered under wet streetlights as Ethan tucked Lily into bed. She was still clutching the napkin Sophie had used to draw a tiny dinosaur beside her rainbow creation. "Did you like Sophie?" he asked as he smoothed the blanket over her. Lily nodded sleepily. "She was kind. She talked to me. She did not look at her phone." Ethan chuckled. "That is true. She made the dinosaur fly." Lily mumbled, her voice already trailing off into dreams. He sat by her for a while, watching her chest rise and fall with each peaceful breath. But his mind was elsewhere, still replaying that moment in the cafe. Sophie's eyes, her voice, the way she held Lily's tiny paintbrush like it was something precious. She had not asked what he did. She had not tried to impress or flirt. She had just been there. And then she left. No excuses, no business cards, no follow-up, just vanished. Ethan Gray was one of the most powerful tech entrepreneurs in the country. His company, Helix Core, had revolutionized cloud security and AI-driven architecture. With a net worth that earned him spots on magazine covers and headlines, he was the kind of man people Googled before meetings and whispered about in elevators. But behind closed doors, Ethan lived differently. The luxury cars were hidden in a private garage, the penthouse only open to a select few, and every weekend he dressed down and became someone else. Just a father taking his daughter to the park, or a man trying to find someone who could love him without the zeros. Since his wife passed away 3 years ago from a sudden illness, his world had shrunk to Lily and work. Friends faded, conversations became transactional, and love? It felt like a myth told to people who still believed in magic. But today had felt different. Across the city, Sophie closed the door of her apartment and dropped her bag on the couch with a sigh. Her clothes were damp from the rain, and her heart still beat too fast. "I made it," she called softly, stepping into the bedroom. A frail voice answered from the bed. "You are late." "I know, I am sorry." She sat beside the girl, brushing back damp strands of dark blonde hair. Her younger sister, Emma, had been in and out of the hospital for months now. Tonight had been another emergency, a sudden spike in fever. Sophie had raced from the cafe to the hospital, holding her breath the entire train ride. "Did he seem nice?" Emma asked, her eyes closed. Sophie smiled faintly. "He was surprising." "Do you like him?" "I barely know him." "But you left fast." Sophie looked at her hands. "You are my priority. Always." She had grown up fast. After their parents divorced, her father had moved out of state, and her mother slowly withdrew into herself. Sophie took over the late-night medicine runs, doctor appointments, homework, and lullabies. Love, for her, had always come second to responsibility. And when she walked into that cafe and saw a man with a child, something about it felt familiar. Not intimidating, not exhausting, just familiar. But she had promised herself never to talk about Emma on a first date. It felt like too much, too heavy. She did not want pity. She wanted connection. Still, when Ethan had grabbed her hand and said those words, "You were the only one who came," something deep inside her had stirred. She had almost stayed. Almost. Back in Ethan's study, he sat at his desk, staring at Sophie's name on a crumpled coffee receipt. There was no phone number, no last name, just Sophie. He leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly. She was different, he whispered to himself. Different in the way her eyes softened when Lily spoke. Different in how she walked in without expectations and left without bitterness. Different in a way he could not afford to lose. The following week, Ethan stood outside the little bookstore on 5th, holding Lily's hand and a small bouquet of daisies. He had spent 2 days tracking down the shop, another 3 deciding whether to go, but now that he was here, the decision felt easy. Sophie was restocking a shelf when she turned and saw them. Her eyes widened slightly in surprise, then softened. "You came to find me?" she asked, wiping her hands on her apron. "I wanted to apologize," Ethan said, offering the flowers, "for grabbing your hand and for not stopping you when you left." She looked at Lily, who was smiling up at her shyly. "Hi, Sophie," the little girl said. "We brought flowers." Sophie knelt to Lily's level. "You remembered my name." "Rainbow dinosaurs never forget," Lily replied proudly. Sophie laughed. She glanced back at Ethan, who was watching them both with quiet hope. "Okay," she said. "Dinner." They chose a quiet family restaurant, the kind with colorful menus and kids' crayons at every table. Lily sat between them, happily coloring as Sophie read the menu aloud in funny voices. You're good with her, Ethan said as the waiter left. I like kids, Sophie replied. They're honest. They do not try to impress you. Ethan nodded, appreciating her more with every passing second. They ordered food, grilled cheese for Lily, pasta for Sophie, and a burger for Ethan, and fell into easy conversation. Sophie told them about her favorite childhood books. Ethan asked Lily to share her new obsession with frogs. Laughter came easily, like the three of them had done this many times before. But just as their food arrived, a sharp voice broke the moment. Sophie? They turned to see a woman in a sleek blazer and high heels approaching their table. Her name tag read Chloe, assistant manager. She worked at the bookstore too. Hi, Chloe, Sophie said, stiffening slightly. Chloe looked between Ethan and Lily, then back to Sophie. Her expression shifted. Is this the guy you mentioned? The blind date? Ethan offered a polite smile, but said nothing. I thought you were joking, Chloe continued, her voice louder now. No offense, I just figured you'd go for someone a little more together. Sophie blinked. Excuse me? Chloe leaned in, mock whispering. You know, less hoodie, more ambition. A single dad too? That's a lot. Lily looked up, confused. What's a lot? Ethan's jaw tightened. But before he could speak, Sophie reached over and took Lily's hand. He's a great dad, she said, her tone even but firm. That's all I care about. Chloe blinked, caught off guard. I did not mean you meant exactly what you said, Sophie replied, her voice calm but her gaze unflinching. Enjoy your evening. Chloe muttered something and walked off, her heels clicking sharply as she disappeared. Ethan stared at Sophie. You did not have to do that. I know, she said, brushing a lock of hair behind her ear, but I wanted to. He looked at her for a long moment, then at Lily, who was now drawing a heart on her placemat. Something in his chest shifted, something real, something steady. He had spent years building walls, testing people, hiding behind plain clothes and false simplicity. But Sophie had just looked through all of it and stayed. Autumn settled into the city like a soft blanket, crisp air, golden leaves, and the scent of roasted chestnuts from street vendors. Over the next few weeks, Ethan and Sophie began to drift into each other's days more naturally. What had started as a second-chance dinner slowly became a quiet, unfolding routine. They took Lily to the park on Saturdays, where Sophie helped her build elaborate leaf castles and pretended to be a princess guarding a squirrel kingdom. On Wednesday nights, they cooked dinner at Sophie's apartment, Lily's favorite being mac and cheese with broccoli trees. And more than once, they spent rainy afternoons sprawled on the living room rug, building puzzles that somehow always ended with Lily declaring herself the winner, even when the pieces were missing. Ethan had not felt this kind of ease in years. Sophie's presence was like warm light filling in the empty corners of his life. She never asked for more than what was offered, never pried into things he was not ready to reveal. But that, somehow, made it harder, because the truth loomed larger with every laugh, every shared story, every quiet moment when their hands touched and lingered just a second too long. She thought he worked in tech, which technically was not a lie. But he knew the truth mattered, and hiding it, his wealth, his title, the empire behind the man she thought she knew, began to feel heavier with every passing day. One evening, as Lily colored by the window and Sophie folded laundry on the couch, Ethan watched them from the kitchen. Sophie caught his gaze and smiled, a soft, knowing look that made his heart clench. He almost told her right then. Almost. But the words got stuck somewhere behind his ribs. A few days later, Sophie was shelving new books at the shop when her coworker Chloe called out from the register. Hey, Sophie, this guy in the tech article looks just like your mystery man. Sophie walked over, her curiosity piqued. Chloe turned her tablet around. It was a profile piece from a business magazine's archives, 2 years old, but the photo was clear. Ethan. Clean-shaven, sharp navy suit, standing in front of a wall of servers. The headline read, Inside Helix Core, the reclusive tech billionaire who changed the future of AI. Sophie's breath caught. The company name was partially blurred by a pop-up ad, but the face was unmistakable. Chloe raised an eyebrow. That him? Sophie said nothing. She left work early that day, her thoughts spinning. Had he lied to her from the beginning? Was everything, the cafe, the hoodie, the way he looked at her, just an act? And if it was not a game, why not tell her? The next time Ethan called, she did not answer. Or the next, or the one after that. By the end of the week, he stood outside her bookstore, hands in his pockets, eyes searching. But Sophie stayed in the back room, watching him through the tiny pane of glass in the office door until he eventually walked away. That night, Ethan sat on the edge of Lily's bed, trying to hide the heaviness in his chest. "Daddy?" she asked, rubbing her sleepy eyes. "Yes, sweetheart?" "Did Sophie leave us?" His breath caught. For a moment, he could not speak. He smoothed her hair back, swallowed hard, and whispered, "I do not know, Lily. I hope not." But even as he said it, he was not sure what hurt more, the ache in his own heart or the confusion in hers. Because losing Sophie now felt like losing something they had only just begun to believe in. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the wooden floors of the bookstore. It was quiet, only the rustle of pages and the soft hum of a ceiling fan overhead. Sophie stood behind the counter, pretending to read a shipment invoice, but her eyes had not moved from the same line in over 10 minutes. Her mind was elsewhere, still tangled in that article, in Ethan's face, in everything that suddenly felt uncertain. Then the door opened. She looked up, heart jumping before she even registered his face. Ethan stood in the doorway, wearing the same plain hoodie, the same jeans, but this time he did not try to smile. He simply looked. Honest? Tired? Real? "Hey," he said quietly. Sophie's hands froze on the paper in front of her. "You found the article." "I did not mean for you to find out like that," he said, stepping inside slowly. "But I knew it would happen eventually." She waited, her expression unreadable. Ethan exhaled. "My name is Ethan Gray. I am the CEO of Helix Corp. Yes, the company in the article. Yes, the one with the servers and the headlines and the billions." A pause. "But the man in that suit? He is not the one who takes Lily to the park. He is not the one who laughs when she draws rainbows on the walls. That version of me exists for business, for boardrooms and negotiations. But it is not the man I wanted you to meet." Sophie said nothing. "I have tried dating as that guy," he continued. "It never worked. People saw the money first, and some tried really hard to say they were not, but you could feel it. Every question, every glance." He looked her in the eyes now, steady. "So I stopped leading with the truth, not to manipulate anyone, just to level the ground, to see who would show up if there were no spotlights." She still did not speak. He took a breath and added gently, "And you came. You sat down, and you made Lily laugh. You never once asked what I did for a living." Sophie looked down at her hands. "So? Did I pass your test?" "No," he said immediately. "It was never a test. I was just a man, hoping to meet someone who would care about Lily first." "And you did?" The silence stretched. The ceiling fan continued its slow rhythm above them. Finally, Sophie lifted her eyes. "I was not angry because you're rich," she said. "I was angry because I liked you, and I thought maybe you liked me too. And when people lie, especially people who live in a different world, it makes it hard to know what is real." Ethan stepped closer. "I do like you. I care about you, Sophie. I just got scared. Scared that if I told you the truth, you would walk away." "I almost did," she said softly. "Why didn't you?" She looked toward the back of the shop, where Lily had once sat cross-legged with a storybook in her lap. A faint smile tugged at her lips. "Because when I looked at Lily," she whispered, "I realized I had already fallen in love with both of you." Ethan's breath hitched. He stepped closer, taking her hands in his. "I do not want to hide anything anymore," he said. "No more tests, no more half-truths. Just me and Lily. And whatever this could be, if you still want it." Sophie squeezed his hand gently. I think I do. It was one of those perfect fall days. Blue skies, golden trees, and just enough wind to carry laughter through the air like music. The countryside stretched wide and golden in every direction, wrapped in the soft rustle of leaves and the occasional flutter of migrating birds overhead. Ethan had arranged a weekend trip away from the constant buzz of the city, trading boardrooms and traffic lights for a small secluded cottage nestled beside a still lake. The cottage, with its stone chimney and wraparound porch, sat at the edge of a meadow where the tall grass danced like ocean waves. Sophie sat on a picnic blanket beneath a towering oak tree, cradling a warm cup of cider between her hands. The sunlight filtered through the amber leaves above her, scattering golden specks across her face. A light breeze teased loose strands of her hair, and her boots sat beside her, forgotten in the grass. Her eyes followed Lily, who was playing just a few yards away, chasing a bright red ball through the open field. Ethan stood not far off, hands in his jacket pockets, occasionally stooping to toss a small pebble into the breeze, or to collect a leaf for Lily's growing forest queen crown. His expression was soft, quietly content, as he watched the two people who had become his entire world. "You really know how to plan a getaway," Sophie said, her voice warm as she looked over her shoulder at him. Ethan shrugged modestly. "I just follow Lily's lead. If there are trees, grass, and something to chase, she's happy." Sophie laughed, tilting her head back slightly, her eyes squinting in the sunlight. "Well, she's not the only one." But the moment was short-lived. Lily's delighted shriek sliced through the air. Her ball had rolled down a gentle slope and bounced onto the narrow gravel road just beyond the meadow's edge. Before either adult could move, Lily bolted after it. "Lily!" Ethan's voice cracked like thunder, sharp, panicked. But Sophie was already running. Her body moved on instinct, cutting through the grass like a flash of light. A car came into view, rounding the bend of the road far too quickly. Her heart thundered as she closed the distance. In one swift motion, she reached Lily, scooped her up, and turned her body, shielding the little girl as they crashed into the ditch beside the road. The car honked violently and screeched to a halt, gravel spraying. It missed them by a breath. Ethan was there seconds later, breath ragged, eyes wide with terror, as he dropped to his knees beside them. "Are you okay? Lily, Sophie, are you hurt?" His voice was thick with panic. Sophie was gasping, mud on her jeans, her elbow bleeding, but she held Lily tightly to her chest. "She's fine," she panted. "She's safe. That's all that matters." Lily clung to her, crying into her shoulder. Ethan looked at Sophie, her torn sweater, her trembling arms, her tangled hair, and something shifted inside him. Not just fear, not just gratitude, something deeper, reverent. He pulled both of them into his arms, holding them close as the wind rushed over the field like a sigh of relief. He whispered Lily's name over and over again, but his gaze never left Sophie's. That night, the world had quieted. The fire crackled softly in the stone hearth, casting warm light over the cozy cottage. Lily lay asleep on the couch, nestled between two pillows, her stuffed bunny tucked beneath her chin. Ethan and Sophie sat at the kitchen table, the only sound the clink of bandage scissors and the crackle of the fire. Sophie had rolled up her sleeve, revealing the scrape across her elbow, dried blood around the edge. "Let me clean that," Ethan said gently, crouching beside her with the first aid kit. She winced as the alcohol touched her skin. "You'd think I'd be used to scrapes by now," he chuckled softly, dabbing the wound. "Still, you shouldn't have to be." Her eyes flicked to the sleeping Lily, then back to him. "I'd do it again, every time." He didn't answer at first, just held the gauze against her elbow, looking at her like he was memorizing her face. "I know," he said quietly. Then, with slow, precise movements, he wrapped the bandage around her arm. When he was done, he didn't let go. He turned her hand over, pressed a kiss to her palm, then to the back of her hand. "You're a part of us now," he whispered. Sophie felt something inside her catch and tremble. She looked into his eyes, warm, raw, full of everything he had not said until now. Her breath stilled. Because in that moment, with his fingers wrapped around hers and Lily's gentle breathing behind them, she understood. This was no longer just a story about loss or blind hope. This was love. This was home. This was real. The grand estate in upstate New York was glowing with soft lights strung across the garden, flickering gently like stars as the evening settled in. It was HelixCore's annual Founders Celebration, a tradition Ethan's parents had started years ago. This year, however, it was more than a business affair. It was personal. Ethan stood near the entrance, dressed in a classic black suit, scanning the growing crowd for two faces that mattered more than any handshake or investor present. Then he saw them. Sophie stepped out of the arriving car in a soft blue dress, her golden hair pinned loosely, elegance in every quiet movement. Her younger sister, Emma, held her arm, a bit shy but clearly thrilled by the setting, and right between them was Lily, skipping in gold flats, her curls bouncing like sunbeams. Ethan walked toward them, his smile easy and full. "You made it." Sophie smiled back. "Of course we did." He leaned down and kissed Lily's forehead. "Ready to meet Grandma and Grandpa?" "Will they have cake?" Lily asked seriously. Ethan laughed. "Absolutely." The evening unfolded beautifully. Music drifted through the garden, guests chatted over glasses of wine, and laughter echoed beneath the trees. Ethan's parents, warm, gracious, and more down-to-earth than most imagined, welcomed Sophie and Emma without hesitation. His mother took Sophie's hand and said gently, "We've heard so much about you, and every word made us smile." Sophie was gracious, poised, but something inside her fluttered. She had never been to a gathering like this, never been part of anything that felt this complete. As the night reached its height, Ethan stepped onto the small platform at the center of the garden. A soft clinking of glass drew silence from the crowd. He cleared his throat, looking out at the people gathered, his board members, longtime colleagues, close friends. But his eyes settled on one person. "I know these nights are usually about strategy and legacy," he began, "but tonight I want to talk about something simpler, something more important." He glanced toward Sophie, who stood frozen near the back, Emma and Lily holding each of her hands. "For a long time, I believed I had to build something big enough to protect the people I loved. But building walls only kept people out. Until someone showed up." He took a breath. "This is Sophie, the woman who taught me that love starts with kindness. That being seen, truly seen, is the foundation for everything that matters. She never asked who I was. She just saw a father and a daughter and made us feel like enough. Silence, then soft applause, then stronger." Sophie stood still as tears welled in her eyes. Emma squeezed her hand gently, and Lily whispered, "That's you." Sophie laughed through the tears, nodding. It was the first time in her life she had ever been introduced, not as a background figure, not as someone temporary, but as part of something, welcomed, acknowledged, loved. When Ethan stepped off the platform and reached for her, she met him halfway. "I have never belonged anywhere," she whispered, voice thick with emotion. He cupped her face gently. "You do now." And beneath the lights, the stars, and the soft hum of music, they stood, surrounded by family, no longer strangers, no longer guarded, just two hearts that had found their way home. The morning sun stretched gently across the garden, casting soft golden light over the breakfast table beneath the ivy-covered trellis. Sunbeams filtered through the leaves like liquid gold, dappling the white linen tablecloth with shifting leafy patterns. A gentle breeze danced through the air, carrying with it the scent of blooming jasmine and warm maple syrup. The world around them felt still, warm, and full, as though time itself had paused to savor this one perfect morning. The table was a charming mess of clinking dishes, syrup bottles, and half-finished plates. Ethan stood by the pitcher, pouring orange juice into a small glass and passing it to Lily, who sat cross-legged on her chair with the earnest focus only a 3-year-old could manage when faced with a mountain of waffles. Sticky syrup clung to her cheek, and a berry had rolled onto her lap, but she was entirely content, humming a tune only she seemed to know. Across from her, Sophie sat with her hands wrapped around a mug of coffee, her legs tucked beneath her, bare feet brushing against the cool, dewy grass. Her golden hair was loosely braided over one shoulder, catching tiny flecks of sunlight as it shifted. There was a peacefulness in her gaze, an ease that had taken time to earn. Beside her, Emma sat carefully spreading strawberry jam on a piece of toast, her movements slow, deliberate. Though still recovering, her strength had returned little by little, and mornings like this had become part of her healing. Every now and then, she glanced up and smiled at something Lily said, something about frog princesses or a castle made of pancakes, and the table would erupt in soft laughter. It was a scene that felt like it had always existed, not born of effort or orchestration, but of quiet connection, trust, and time, the kind of togetherness that can only grow after all the storms have passed. Sophie reached across the table and gently brushed a crumb from Lily's sticky cheek. "You're going to be sticky all day," she teased. Lily grinned, unfazed. "Sticky and happy." Ethan chuckled as he took a seat beside them. "Best combination?" Their laughter mingled with birdsong, and for a moment it was just that. Joy, simple and undeserved and wholly theirs. Then Lily, ever curious, looked up with a thoughtful furrow in her brow. "Daddy," she said, her voice soft but certain, "is Sophie our family now?" The question floated through the air, light as the morning breeze, but it landed with the quiet weight of something sacred. Ethan looked across the table at Sophie. Her eyes were already glistening, her fingers gently resting atop Emma's hand, grounding them both. A small, breathless smile played on her lips, hopeful, hesitant, and full of love. He stood, not rushed, and walked slowly around the table. Then he knelt beside them and wrapped his arms around all three, Sophie, Lily, and Emma, holding them close in one protective, tender embrace. He kissed the top of Lily's head. "Yes," he said softly, his voice thick with emotion. "Forever." Sophie's tears fell quietly, not from surprise, but from something deeper. Gratitude, relief, a sense of arrival. Her hand reached for Ethan's, their fingers interlacing instinctively, fitting together with ease and intention. The morning sun caught in her hair, in the softness of her smile, in the quiet that followed, a peace only found in belonging. No longer guests at each other's table, no longer travelers passing through borrowed time, just a family, built not by blood or plans or perfect timing, but by kindness, by trust, and the courageous quiet act of choosing one another. 4 hearts, 1 home, forever. And so, what began as a quiet blind date on a rainy afternoon became the beginning of something unshakably beautiful, a family stitched together not by perfection, but by love, trust, and kindness. If this story moved you, imagine how many more are waiting to be told.